Good morning. Good morning and good afternoon all. As you've just heard, we will be recording this event for social media content and so forth. So thank you for your permission to do that. And welcome to today's webinar. It is hosted by the GPA and Mercy Corps under the Transforming Humanitarian Access Program, also known as THEA. This marks the launch of the policy brief, or known as Powering Inclusion, Policy and Regulatory Landscapes Shaping Energy Access for Displaced Populations, which will be emailed out to all who have registered to today's event after the webinar. Before I begin my opening remarks, can I ask all of you to put your name, job title, organisation and country location in the chat so we know who's joined us? Thank you. Right, just a bit of background to THEA, then displacement settings in general, and then I'll move on to the policy brief as a way of introducing to today's policy webinar. The THEA program supports a shift towards more sustainable energy delivery models in humanitarian settings and to increase access to clean energy solutions for displacement-affected communities. It does so by leveraging a blend of research and evidence building, data-driven advocacy, and the implementation of market-based interventions. By identifying promising inclusive energy delivery models, THEA aims to facilitate the replication and scaling, ultimately enhancing energy access for displacement-affected communities. The global humanitarian system is facing an unprecedented convergence of crises, record levels of forced displacement, the escalating impact of climate change, and severe budget cuts. In this context, the traditional model of parallel humanitarian-only energy delivery is not only unsustainable, but also a critical failure in our collective response. Energy is the bedrock of dignity, safety, and opportunity. Without it, education, healthcare, and livelihoods collapse. The current funding shortfalls faced by humanitarian actors make it impossible to continue with business as usual. This moment of fiscal constraint therefore demands a paradigm shift towards efficiency and sustainability. We must transition from inefficient short-term projects to integrated national systems that leverage development finance and market forces. This policy brief provides the evidence and the roadmap for that shift, arguing that integrated displacement populations into national energy planning is the most effective way to do better with less and build long-term resilience for all. The policy brief presents a comparative analysis of the policy and regulatory environments in 4 major refugee hosting countries: Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Bangladesh. It moves beyond technical solution to address the fundamental systematic barriers that prevent displaced persons from accessing reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy. The research finds that while progressive policies exist, implementation is consistently hampered by fragmented funding and a reliance on short-term humanitarian projects, weak institutional coordination between humanitarian and development actors, legal and political barriers that exclude refugees from national systems, a critical lack of refugee participation in energy planning. Crucially, the brief argues that the inclusive energy policy is not just a moral imperative, but a strategic one. It demonstrates that when refugees are included, everyone wins, attracting large-scale development financing, building more resilient infrastructure, fostering social cohesion, and creating market opportunities that benefit both host and displaced communities. I would like now to hand over to my colleague Joel Hangi, Inclusivity Lead for the THEA program, to provide us with more information. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the short presentation, and feel free to drop them into the chat. So thank you, everyone, and over to you, Joel.
Thank you, Mark. And hello, everyone, again. My name is Joel Hangi, as Mark just mentioned, and I'm the Inclusivity Advisor of the GPA Coordination Unit. And I'm so honored to be taking you through this, the content of the reports, actually, And hopefully it's really something that will reveal more compared to what people are currently thinking in the sector. And before I dive into the content of the reports, I'd like to start by highlighting this. When we talk about displaced population needs, we often hear about immense challenges, as Mark just mentioned. But today, on a positive note, I'd like to highlight that we are going to focus on a powerful part of the solution. So we'll be looking at how smart, inclusive energy policy is not just a humanitarianism gesture, but also an incredible opportunity for development, sustainability, and growth. So let's go to the details of the reports. Next slide, please. Thank you. As we discuss about refugees and displaced populations' energy needs, it's essential we begin with an understanding of the overall situation, and data helps us here better. So the number is actually shocking. We are currently speaking of over 120 million displaced population. However, the key pinning point is not just the number. Actually, it's rather the reality of displacement, which is not a short-term situation anymore. And refugees and other forcibly displaced persons are hosted in countries where access to resources, including energy, it's limited. And as a result, we are seeing a widespread of course, resilience on wood and for cooking, and little to no access to electricity. And this is a situation that is holding people into poverty circles and dependency, unfortunately. And if we have to talk of solution, what is the solution? I could say the solution starts with, of course, policy. An inclusive policy is not just kind of nice statements or sentiments. It should be a deliberate decision by the government to include refugees and displaced population in national energy plans. And this is something that it's a critical shift because policy unlock everything else. It tells the investors where, of course, to put their money. It's also hold everyone accountable. And without a proper or a clear energy planning and also an inclusion in energy planning, it's not realistic to talk about access to energy for displaced population. Next slide, please. To really understand the landscape, and when we were writing these reports, we took two different study approaches. So first, we started by understanding or conducting a well-detailed policy analysis. And with this, we had to not just to limit ourselves on one country. So we had to compare different countries. This include Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda to see a full spectrum of approaches. And also we had to see what is the level of policy from this spectrum. And also we went ahead with the second approach, which is to go to the source. We spoke directly with people making it happen and those who are affected by it. So this including government ministries, development actors, humanitarian agencies, as well as refugees themselves. So this combination of documents, review and stakeholders' input allowed us to identify not just the policy, what the policy says, but also what is actually working, what is not working, and why. Next slide, please. Now, speaking of the findings, I'd like to say that the research revealed an overarching kind of picture of policy landscape, which is characterized by a significant gap between ambition and action. And while we found some truly progressive policies, the implementation is constantly inconsistent, if I can just say so, that. So let me highlight a few critical findings here on the table. So first of all, starting with Uganda. So Uganda has taken lead in terms of explicitly including refugees in their national energy policy and also their sustainable energy response plan. And it has been, of course, a kind of creating a clear roadmap towards the plan that they have developed. And this policy has clearly been a magnet for major investments leading to tangible results like scale-up solar mini-grids. Kenya, on the other side, shows a different kind of path in terms of the national energy policies, a little bit quiet on refugees and their inclusion. However, the devolved governance structure has allowed the subnations such as Turkana County to step up and create its own inclusive energy plan with direct refugee consultation. So it's a powerful kind of bottom-up approach and also an example of local innovation filling the national gap. In Ethiopia, we see a strong intent of refugee inclusion from recent approach, government collaboration with GIZ, for example, the inclusion of displaced population in the multi-actor cooking strategy as a typical example. But it's really important to say that the reality is that there is still a lack of a comprehensive national policy, especially addressing energy access of the displaced population. And in addition, the lack of funding and technical capacity has really affected the refugee inclusion in the energy planning of the country. And finally, speaking of Bangladesh, so Bangladesh, the situation is constrained by humanitarian-only approach through platforms such as the Joint Response Plan. And this is it's provide a very crucial short-term kind of aid like cooking gas, but it's completely separate from the national grid and it's vulnerable to funding cuts, unfortunately. So the country completely exclude refugees from the national energy strategies. And it's a situation that's still keep refugees in a kind of circle of dependency. Next slide, please. Now, so what is the causing of these disconnects and that we highlighted? So identify several systematic barriers that repeatedly emerged across different countries. So one that came across strongly is the language gap. So many policies talk about universal access, vulnerable groups, but they fail to explicitly name displaced population or even refugees. So this vagueness means there is no clear mandate or even operational pathways for including them. And critically, the pinning point here is there is no dedicated funding for refugees. Coordination gap. So there is often a stark divide between humanitarian actors and also government agencies running national grids. So they operate in separate silos without with different timeline fundings. They have different funding, and also leading to a situation that is leading to a fragmented kind of approach. Data issue is also one point that that came across in several countries. Stakeholders mentioned that there is an issue with robust data tracking system, also a committee that can be dedicated to follow up on policy implementation. So it's not there, it's not funded. Therefore, monitoring and implementation of policy becomes a little bit challenging. And finally, the legal and regulatory gaps. So in some contexts, refugees, they lack legal status directly. It's a situation that's block them from accessing energy. In other cases, we have administrative barriers like complex ID requirements for grid connection or restrictions on private sector operation in camps, and also some complexity around the process. So together, these gaps they really work against even the well-fleshed out policies, and unfortunately leading to failure to reach the people that the policy meant to serve. Next slide, please. So based on these findings, our recommendations are targeted at closing these specific gaps. So first of all, we are strongly recommending that national government should embed refugees in their national frameworks. So government must move beyond viewing this as a temporary humanitarian issue, because it's not short term, and formally include or incorporate displaced population into national energy plans and subnational strategies like Uganda has done. Secondly, the intention is good. However, it should be backed up with budget and legal provision. So inclusion must be reflected in national budgets. We need to move beyond 100% donor reliance and create public budget lines. At the same time, we must remove all the administrative barriers that prevent refugees from connecting to the grids or accessing energy subsidies. The other recommendation is shifting the financing model. And this is really one of that speaks to the donors. It's really important that donor think of start providing a multi-year funding that's aligned with national policy cycles, not just short-term humanitarian projects. We also think that it's really important to present and advocate for energy as human rights. And this is a way of framing it as a way that builds a strong foundation for accountability and inclusion. And finally, there is a need for coordinating effort. So it's really important that we must establish formal multi-stakeholders platform that brings government officials, NGO, private sector, and displaced population at the same table. And this is the only way that can break down the silos and ensure that everyone is working toward the same goal. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? Our call to action is urgent, and it's for everyone on this call. To the governments, we urge you to be bold, revise your energy policies to explicitly include displaced population. And this isn't just kind of footnote approach. It should be a core part of your national electrification and clean cooking strategy. To donors and developing agencies, it's really important that we start moving beyond pilot projects. We need the donor community to start providing multi-year funding, flexible funding that align with national policy cycles. But at the same time, this is how we can, of course, build a sustainable system and not just temporary solution. And to all of us, it's really important that we advocate and also participate by raising our voices and also champion this cause. So advocate for energy as human rights, support refugee-led innovations, and most importantly, ensure that this displaced population themselves they have a space when it comes to decision-making processes. And of course, with 120 million displaced population, we need a decisive action. And we believe that this generation, this team can still close the gap of energy access for goods. Next slide, please. In closing, I would like to leave you with these final thoughts. And I think Mark mentioned that including displaced population is not just a moral kind of imperative, it's really a smart one. And it's something that has to build, it's as a result, it builds more kind of reliance, strong economies and strong communities. And of course, you can access the full reports after the call, after this call. It will be shared by email, and also you can also access by scanning the QR. And thank you all for your time and your attention, and I'd like, of course, to take any question that you might have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joelle, for that very brief overview of the report. I've had the pleasure of reading through it in detail. It's a really interesting read. So please, when it does pop up in your inbox, please do take the time to read through it and see how you can support this initiative as we go forward. We've only got one question at this moment in time in the chat. So if anyone has any specific questions for Joelle, please either raise your hand or drop them in the chat. But before we go to that, I'm going to put a surprise question to you, Joelle. Having gone through this process, was there anything that surprised you in terms of the outputs? I mean, what is your sort of key, I wasn't expecting that moment?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I think the most interesting part of this journey, like putting everything together and writing the report itself, was when I was talking to different stakeholders. And it was really strong that a lot of people who have been involved into developing or contributing to the development of energy policies in different countries, they still believe that there is much that is still needed, regardless of where they are, and also what we can praise at the moment to say, oh, there is some intention, there is some work here, but they still believe like there is more that still that need to be done. Maybe just to give an example, when I was talking with one of the stakeholders in Kenya, and the issue of how open a policy should be in terms of, or how intentional they should be in terms of mentioning the population and say refugees. Is it really something that has a lot of impact, or they think having that kind of broad words like vulnerable people is something that they still work? And they said, yeah, I think it's really important to have the names there, like the population targeted, clearly mentioned there, because it makes a difference. When you have projects coming, they have to tick the boxes. And if we say, for example, vulnerable people, anyone can, depending on where they're operating, they can say these people are vulnerable, and therefore probably displaced population will be left behind only because of all the complexity around cap settings or settlements. So it's really important to be intentional and mention refugees or displaced population. Yeah.
No, great. Thank you for that, Joelle, and sorry for bouncing that question on you. We have one question in the chat by Jackson, and apart from asking for a job, his main question really is host government political will is a crucial factor. What specific strategies have been most effective in securing this political commitment, especially given concerns some governments may have about long-term infrastructure investment in temporary settlements? Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. That's a great question anyway. As I said, we had really extended to reach almost everyone, including the donor community, and try to understand their influence when it comes to policy development. And one of the things that we have seen across all the 4 countries, one of the trigger for an inclusive policy is funding. So beyond the intention, goodwill of the country, there is always that constraint of funding. And as soon as we have, let's say, development actors or anyone, an organization or someone who is really willing to support that, then you find the country open up in terms of being inclusive and develop really inclusive approaches where we have refugees a part of the targets that they have. So of course, the intentional doesn't really define the success of the policy, but when we add on different layers such as funding, such as expertise, because also having the right people to develop the policy was also a key point that was mentioned. So the expertise, the funding, when we have all this together, it's really something that brings to having a very comprehensive policy document, but also it's moved beyond just having a well-polished document. So it has a great planning and how they should implement the policy.
Great, thank you, Joel. We have one more question in the chat. And this is from Fonahamni. Apologies if I mispronounce your name. Do you have a unique need common to all displaced persons?
Sorry? Come again?
Is there a common need from all displaced people?
Yeah, of course. And again, we talk to displaced population, refugees and other categories of displaced people. And it was clear that apart from just having access, like a handouts kind of approach, they were really concerned about their involvement into decisions, into planning of policies. And where we see like countries engaging refugees in one way or another, at least it was clear from the refugee perspective that the policy makes sense to us when we are involved in the process. The need is like, of course, the end need is for refugees to have access to electricity, to have access to clean cooking, but to get there, they also like need to be part of the process, share their insights, what they think would work and what they recommend, and see that happening, as they have to feel like they're not beneficiaries, but they're also contributing to the solution that is coming with the policy. Yeah.
No, great. Thanks, Joel. I don't see any other questions, but please, colleagues, if questions do come to mind, please do keep dropping them in the chat. We'll pick those up either at the end or afterwards. But thank you very much, Joel. I'll give you a bit of a break now. Thank you for the presentation. We'll move into our panel discussion. So first off, I'd like to introduce our panel. Unfortunately, Diwan Ranham from UNHCR in Bangladesh is sick and can't join us today, but we're delighted to be able to call upon the 5 colleagues that you see on screen at this moment in time. And apologies, I will be using first names. This is not a sign of lack of respect, but one to save any of my embarrassment as I mispronounce your surname. So apologies, panelists, for this kind request. So on today's call panel, we have Ayu, who's Partnerships Office at Last Mile Climate, Officer, sorry, at Last Mile Climate. We have Ben from RHD Program Coordinator, Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company. We also have Amani, County Chief Officer in charge of Energy, Mining and Petroleum at Turkana County Government. We also have Dorwit, Director of Ethiopian Clean Cooking Alliance. And finally, we have David, Senior Operations in the East and Southern Africa Regional Bureau for UNHCR. Welcome all for taking your time out of your heavy schedules to participate in today's panel discussion. Colleagues online, when you're listening, please do feel free to drop questions in the chat. There will be an opportunity to direct any of those at any or all of the panelists after the conversation. Panelists, when I call you out, it would be nice if you could just turn on your camera so that we can see you. And if I may start with you, Ayu, with your sort of very unique perspective, working in this space in terms of energy, but also having lived as a displaced person. My first question to you is, what is lost when policymakers create energy strategies without the direct input of refugees?
Thank you so much for your question, and thank you for everybody who has stand up to attend today's webinar. First, I want to give a background of 3 key refugee settlements in Uganda that has more refugee than the nationals. So in Uganda, Adjumani, Yumbe, Terego have more refugees than the locals. So, and if you add the total number of refugees in Uganda, is close to 2 million now. And for me, leaving refugees out of a national policy, for me, I would say it's disastrous, because with the numbers of refugees in Uganda, it's almost a population of some countries. So a policy without refugee inclusion is a policy that leave out the future, because the future is what we are planning for. Being a refugee, these days it's very easy. It's just an overnight thing. Many of the countries in the world now are really going through a lot, and many people are becoming refugees when they are not prepared. So having a policy that includes refugees, it is securing our futures, because you don't know tomorrow. So Mark, that is how I would like to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've left a very clear message to our audience today. It's disastrous without inclusion of refugees in these policies. So thank you, Ayo. Hopefully we'll come back for another follow-up question after. Coming to you, Ben, if I may. Uganda's Sustainable Energy Response Plan is a benchmark policy, but the brief highlights a critical gap in its implementation and dedicated budgeting. From your position at the Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company, what are the most significant operational hurdles in executing a policy like this? Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. From our own observations and from also the implementation challenges, you realize that this response plan was built way back around 2019. However, it became a self-document which was not being applicable for quite a number of reasons. Of course, the number one reason is that to run a plan of this nature, of this large budget, needs a coordination office and a secretariat for that case. Therefore, because of budget deficits with the Ministry of Energy, who were supposed to set up a secretariat to coordinate all the implementing partners and development agencies, this has not been possible. So the coordination framework for achieving the outcomes intended in the response plan are inadequate. The second area also, which is a huge bottleneck, is generally speaking, there is a funding gap arising from, of course, donor fatigue. And many of the activities aligned in this response plan require funding, which will be, of course, from various sources. You will find, in a way, quite intermittent remittances come. For instance, now the World Bank is in supporting a number of interventions, and you'll find UNHCR is constrained with its development partners working on a number of aspects. These financial challenges are also impacting on full achievement of the outcomes or the results that are intended in the SEP. The third area also is the delivery models for energy response in the different refugee settlements is not well aligned and not coordinated. You will find some partners doing still handouts up to date, whereas others are developing the market systems. The two don't work together. When a private sector-led interventions are driven into refugee operations or refugee settlements, they require, for instance, an enabling environment for which they can only compete among the private entrepreneurs who are investing their capital or who are drawing capital from banks to invest. However, if you find situations where a development partner maybe provides funding to an IP to procure and distribute solar lanterns or solar home systems for free, this already gets back into the market system, because some households definitely will prefer to prioritize and sell this off at a very relatively cheap price. And this in the market itself has a bit of an influx on in terms of what then the entrepreneurs or the private sector can do to mitigate this. Maybe lastly, in that same way, you have the short-term interventions arising from the budget cycles coming from UNHCR and its implementing partners. These one-year cycles cannot develop a sustainable market. In most cases, they are all into processes where, for instance, they just want to achieve a given target within a year. A critical example, for instance, is those that are involved in biomass production for wood fuel. You cannot say tree growing is a one-year cycle thing. So these partners will probably start planting, and then their time of implementation runs out. All these investments go to the drain. So these are some of the key challenges, what I consider as critical bottlenecks affecting the implementation of SAP. Thank you.
No, great. Thank you, Ben. If I can summarize, what you're saying is that, all-inclusive policies must come with secretariat, budget, coordination, and long-term funding. I think that's a very clear message. Thank you for that, Ben. Hopefully we'll come around for a second question later. Amini, if I can call on you, and it's great to see you in another one of our panels, so thank you. I think it's about a year ago you participated on at Gogla. Very specifically, Turkana County is a pioneer in devolved inclusive energy planning. From your experience, what does effective coordination between the national government, humanitarian agencies, and the county look like in practice?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to join you again in this discussion. And I'm happy to be part of this timely topic, especially now that Kenya is integrating the refugees into their system. So part of our effective coordination is we have a range of activities that we do jointly with other partners, especially the humanitarian agencies operating in Turkana County. And part of those activities that we undertake is that we undertake kind of a joint leadership and clear roles, where we have established a formal coordination forum called the Monthly Environment and Energy Forum, consisting of the county officials, the national government, private actors, humanitarian agencies in Turkana County, where we discuss our monthly progress, part of our achievements, the best practice, and also the challenges that we are encountering in the energy sectors, and also trying to promote sustainable energy solutions for both the hosting community and, of course, the displaced setting. And we also carry out joint planning and prioritization, where we hold also quarterly planning workshops to align our strategies and also scale up our areas of intervention and also avoid overlap. Part of it is also we have adapted aligned financing or a pooled financing mechanism and joint agreed funding windows through the implementation of the County Integrated Development Plan, which is a 5-year plan. Right now, we are implementing the third County Integrated Plan. The third one started in 2022, and it will be operational up to 2027. And here is where we most of our partners use the County Integrated Plan to even mobilize for resources outside the county, even from the donors. So this has brought alignment of our strategies, because by them using the county plan, we have aligned our strategies, and we are able to ensure those funding that we secure, we are not overlapping. The county government will be focused in certain areas, and of course the partners will extend in those areas that the county government is not able to achieve. Other areas we focus is on integrated service delivery through establishment of the sectoral task teams called the county sector groups. It's called the CSG. Focusing more on areas of nutrition, health, water, food security, education, energy, and also these forums brings together all the humanitarian agencies focusing on energy, and of course the line national ministry at the national level, that is the Kenya Power, and also we have also brought in the private developers to advance our energy initiatives, and also community representative to help us promote the effectiveness and of course the acceptance of the community, because involving the hosting refugees and also the community into the decision making will promote the acceptance and the effectiveness of the project. Because if they are aware and also they understand the project, they will be able to promote such initiatives. And other issues is capacity building and institutional strengthening. That is also an area that we focus on. And through the support of GIZ, through Energy Solution for Displacement Setting, we have been able to capacity build a number of our officers at the county government level and even at the learning institutions to be on energy initiative, and of course how best they can also mobilize and how we can advance this agenda of inclusivity in the energy sector. The last one is I have earlier mentioned on the involvement of the community. The need to involve the community, both the hosting refugee and the hosting population in planning and decision making. This is a very critical element, and we have successes of this story because through involving them in planning and decision making, we have been able to promote the acceptance and the effectiveness of the project, because most of the communities right now, we have organizations that are being owned by the refugees, that are being run by the refugees. Example is the Okapi Green Energy. It's a refugee-owned organization that is also powering part of the camp at the refugee camp 3 and 4. And that is, we can say it's a good testimony, because through that, we have been able to support groups and also the hosting community and the refugee community who have interest to venture into the energy sector, and also to be able to support the population, empowering some of the households. Thank you.
Emily, great. So good to hear about how you're successfully coordinating the Takana County plan. And if I may sort of summarize very quickly, I think, having aligned strategies around the plan itself certainly is a good starting point, but then following which you have well-defined roles, joint planning, pooled funding, centralized implementation, and throughout that, community involvement. Thank you, Emily, for those insights. It's appreciated. And I'd now like to come to our fourth panelist, Dorwit. Ethiopia's multi-actor cooking energy strategy is a promising framework. Related to this, how is the Ethiopian Clean Cooking Alliance working to ensure refugee communities are not just beneficiaries, but active participants in the clean cooking market? Over to you, Dorwit.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, great. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to share our experience in the humanitarian setting in Ethiopia. As you mentioned, the strategy is launched in 2023, and we are part of the technical committee for the establishment of this strategy at a national level. But due to some fund limitation and our expertise in that area, we are not much working in a humanitarian setting previously. But this is the right time. This discussion is timely for us, because it's allow us to reflect how refugee community can actively participate in benefiting for clean cooking market, because we are now partnering with the Mercy Corps Ethiopia to implement a large-scale cooking diary study in a Shadar refugee camp. We are in a data collection activity right now, on October until December, in the Somali region. So this study is guided by the mixed teams. It's currently in baseline studies, aim to better understand the cooking behavior and market dynamics in a displacement setting. So in this initial field experience, I personally observed from the refugee community is highly entrepreneurial and actively engaged in various business activity. For example, I saw in different refugee houses, the burn jikoko stove is commonly known, and they use it more than the host communities. That's amazing for to see the transforming from traditional way to improved charcoal stoves. Additionally, from our engagement in e-cooking training and demonstration for those 18 householders, we found that a strong community's interest beyond the selected participant, thus signing for growing market potential for clean cooking technologies in a refugee setting. In addition to that, I had one experience in Melkadida refugee camp before 2 years. I witnessed that a woman-led entrepreneur producing improved charcoal stove. That's a refugee community can be, be producers and innovators, not just users. So in a nutshell, while our alliance work in a refugee setting right now is still limited by fund, but ECCA is committed to expanding our engagement across other campuses, focusing on access, capacity building, and market participation to empower refugee communities, active players in Ethiopia clean cooking ecosystem. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Dor. If I understood you correctly, we should be looking at refugee communities not just as users but also innovators, and especially around moving away from traditional cooking methods to clean cooking for commercial activities. So great, thank you, Dor. Hopefully we'll be back with a second question to you. There's one person we haven't spoken to on our panel so far, and that's David from UNHCR. David, if I may, from your regional perspective, what is the fundamental disconnect in the governance structure that repeatedly causes these inclusive energy policies to falter or fail after they launched? Is the primary breakdown in the financial models, the institutional mandates, or the political accountability between different levels of government? Thank you, David. We've left you a very challenging question for you. So
Sure.
please, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. And I'll take it up. For sure, inclusive energy policies in this region often begin with very strong intent, but it falters through due to systemic challenges. I'll really highlight three major disconnects. And here we are looking at institutional fragmentation as one of them, whereby we find the ministries of energy, refugee affairs, and environment often operate in silos, and their mandates are misaligned. And so it leads at times to duplication, at times to neglect or inefficiencies. So local governments, despite being on the front lines, are frequently not fully engaged during national policy design, which undermines the ownership and sustainability in the long run. The second element is the unresponsive financial models. Funding is typically short-term, donor-driven and not embedded in national budget. This limits the scalability and long-term viability. Financial models often fail to account for the realities of the low income, the refugees or the displaced communities, leading to heavy underinvestments. The third element is the low levels of accountability. And here we find that there is poor vertical integration between the national ambitions and the local implementation. So displacement contexts are often treated as temporary, and refugees are rarely involved in policy designs. This results in solutions that lack community relevance and long-term planning. I'll give some few country snapshots. Maybe we've heard from the team from Uganda that yes, we do have progressive refugee policies, but energy inclusion is limited by weak ecosystems and financing gaps. In Kenya, we have promising projects like the Koroboe mini grid, which face regulatory and integration challenges. And then in Ethiopia, we do have innovative private-led mini grids, like in Sheda. They show potential, but they struggle with capital and technical support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. You took a very challenging question and delivered it very succinctly as an answer. So thank you for that. And if I heard you correctly, there's three things about reality: institutional fragmentation, short-term funding cycles, and lack of community engagement. Great, thank you, David. We do have time to go through a second round of questions, but panelists, please do keep your answers relatively short. We need to finish on the hour, if that's possible. So, Io, if I can go back to you, could you share a specific insight or concern that you believe only lived experience can provide, and explain why that missing voice makes the resulting policies less effective for everyone?
Thank you so much. Lived experience is quite, I always say, as refugees, we don't read climate reports, we live them. And for me, that is a very unique experience that when it is integrated in the science, that can really bring a very good outcome. One is that as refugees, we know our problems, we understand them, but also that unique part is that we know the solutions. So what lived experience brings is that unique solutions that can easily scale up. There are so many projects that are dying in the refugee community that is not accepted. Why? Because there was no co-creation with the refugee community. And so that is the uniqueness of the lived experience. So I am supporting Solco and ECOWADA partnership in Uganda. And our partners are very intentional about inclusion of refugees in the national planning. UNEP, they're leading this. UNEP Copenhagen Center, they're making sure that refugee voice, it is included in the National Adaptation Plan and the NDC. And so they're not leaving at that. There are also already policies that are working. We are holding government accountable and see what is the gaps. We don't want to develop very decorated, policies and then not implement them. So we make sure that all policies in Uganda include the refugee community, and because for other partners to actually operate in the refugee setting, you need enabling environment. And this policy inclusion is very, very, very key for us. So as Solco partnership, we are working closely with the government, but also I don't want to leave without mentioning this, that in Uganda, there's political willingness. There's acceptance. So every time we speak, government listen and immediately ask, what should we do? And so it's good to go as a team. It's good to speak one voice, and we are doing that very well. And I think Uganda should be used as a case study, because there's a lot of political willingness, which it is not in other countries. Thank you so much. Over.
Thank you so much. And if I may use some of your words, it's all the answers aren't going to be in a book. They really needed to be supported by those with the experience on the ground that know what solutions can and will work. So thank you, Ayo, for joining us and providing your insights. Really appreciated. Ben, if I can come to you as the finance person on this call, can I ask what innovative financial mechanisms or de-risking tools are needed to crowd in private sector investment that is required to make these inclusive policies a reality on the ground? Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, once again, based on, of course, the experience that is built from the previous interventions, the ESP is built on a robust mechanism where, for instance, the instruments that are used are more durable, but also supports the private sector in addressing the gaps. The main thing we are doing, one of the instruments is the result-based framework financing. This provides financing to, of course, to end users, that's say on the demand side for the beneficiaries, to reduce the cost of acquiring the assets or the energy products they need, but through the private sector, who then promotes the sales and then is able to be paid the subsidy prices. This is one of the most effective, I would say, in the past few years that we have experienced, beyond just the ESP project, because result-based framework financing targets the beneficiaries based on the interest, not like where you provide the products without necessarily knowing the needs of the people. So that's where the first line of instrument is. The second line of instrument is through lines of credit, which are passed through financial banks or commercial banks to the energy companies. The purpose of this line of credit instrument is as a capital development or maybe as a capex in order to import the energy products from wherever and be able to clear them through the various channels of goods and services that come into the country. Uganda is, of course, Revenue Authority provides for a tax exemption for renewable energy products that come as a complete unit. The challenges sometimes energy companies face is importation of product in piecemeals. You find when the panels come along, the batteries come along, there it is not tax exempt. So this capex provides for them to be able to import the whole home system, for instance, from the battery to up to the lighting and the panels, so that they can be exempted from the taxes. There's other area also, the tool that works very well for now is providing sales incentive on the supply side for the companies to be able to make the last mile, what we call as the hard-to-reach destination or hard-to-reach last miles. They are provided an additional incentive. This does not cover, for instance, the reduction in the subsidy for the beneficiary or maybe the client, but this provides for the mitigation in terms of logistics, in terms of the risks they could easily meet in transmitting these products from, let's say, the capital into where the refugee settlement is. Because most of our refugee settlements are in the most rural and hard-to-reach locations, so this incentive provides for that. The other area also is the use of local financial institutions, which are provided funding to be able, in form of loans, to be able to supplement the pay-go systems. In fact, some of the clients might want to acquire an asset, let's say water pump for irrigation. The subsidy still remains very high. If you provide, let's say an example, a subsidy of 60% on a 10 million water pump, the client will still be required to pay about 3.5 million Uganda cedis or 4 million Uganda cedis. For the local person or for the refugee, this is still a lot of money. So then the PFIs, what we call these are participating financial institutions, can then mitigate this by providing credit line right at the edge, so as to be able to acquire this, and the client then can pay in bits of installments in a period of 12 to 18 months. Then last but not least is asset risk guarantees. A company, a private sector may import some energy products or energy assets and install it into the premises of an entrepreneur or a local individual. However, you might find this product fails to work not as a result of end user problem, but these are faults that arise as a result of maybe coming from outside up to where, for instance, the last destination is. So this guarantee provides for that. In the event where the client is unable to pay as a result of non-functionality, then the ESCO or the energy company does not lose out. The risk guarantee for the asset then covers for that after being verified that this is indeed as a result of that. So these are some of the instruments that effectively are working, and they have been able to support our work in ensuring that we mitigate the challenges arising from this.
Ben, thank you very much for that and very detailed response. I think we need to do a full webinar just with you to go through our financial lines. But if I can summarize, really need to direct the money where it's most needed. We need lines of credit open to private sector solutions, tax exemptions, utilization of local financial institutions, and asset risk guarantees. Ben, thank you very much for giving us a good overview of that. We are running a little short of time, but Amini, I've got a very short question for you. What one change in how international partners engage would you most significantly improve your ability to deliver energy services to both host and refugee communities?
I think for us, for me, I can say one change that we really aspire is the establishment of a collaborative multi-stakeholder partnership with the local government, the humanitarian agency working in the energy sector, international organization, community representative. This approach will foster shared responsibilities, resource pooling, and of course, localized solution tailored to community needs. And it will also ensure better alignment of policies that promote sustainable development and, of course, sustainable energy access for all.
Imani, thank you for such a very brief but important thing there. I think what we're saying here is strong partnerships and acting as a trusted partner, right, as we go forward. So thank you, Imani, for that. Dorwit, very quick response, please. How can humanitarian actors better partner with local alliances like yours to help build a sustainable market rather than simply distributing products?
Thank you, Mark. As you mentioned, local alliance associations are playing a crucial role in creating a sustainable and long-term impact rather than short-term product distribution. As a national platform, we strongly partnership across the government, private sector, like different stop producers, SMEs, and humanitarian energy policy, and the microfinance institution and development partner. So we bring the local knowledge, network, and policy engagement as large scale to make the clean cooking intervention more effective and scalable. For example, ECCA is one of the technical committee members for the recently developed National Clean Cooking Roadmap, contributing directly national strategies for policy design. So our ongoing collaboration with the organization, like as I mentioned earlier, with Mercy Corps and Humanitarian Energy PLC in shelter refugee camp, it shows how partnership with a local alliance can maximize impact, ensure cultural relevance, and optimize limited resource for gathering sustainability. So therefore, we encourage humanitarian international partner to engage and collaborate with us, working together, not just to distribute stops or products, but to build inclusive, resilience, and clean cooking market that's beyond a project lifetime. Thank you.
No, thank you. And it really ties in previously what Amini was saying about, having these strong local partnerships and maximizing those partnerships, especially where we've got limited resources, right? So thank you for that, Dorwit. And David, your second question is, how can we re-engineer the incentives to make host countries genuine and long-term stakeholders in inclusive energy?
Thank you very much, Mark. I think the first thing we need to do is to shift the narrative from that moral obligation to strategic national development, whereby we see refugees as energy consumers who can drive demand and justify infrastructure. We see them as economic contributors whose inclusion supports local development, and then as climate allies whose energy access can unlock green finance. So some of the concrete mechanism that we could use is the resort-based financing, whereby we tie donor and development finance to performance indicators that reward governments for integrating displaced populations into national energy plans. Then we look at the carbon finance, whereby we can try and enable host countries to monetize inclusive energy projects through carbon markets or climate finance mechanisms. And then another aspect is the braided finance and risk guarantees, where we could use public-private partnership with sovereign guarantees to attract private capital. We structure the PPPs that include risk-sharing mechanisms for energy investments in marginalized areas, whereby governments can offer sovereign guarantees or insurance to attract private capital. Then we have policy integration, whereby we embed inclusive energy targets into national development plans and SDG 7 strategies. Back to you, Mark.
David, you summarized these very difficult questions very quickly. Thank you for that. And I think the key bit was what you said at the beginning, right? Shifting the narrative, seeing, refugees and displaced communities as energy consumers that drive development. And then how do we use innovative finance mechanism to support the development around the energy infrastructure that is required. Well, thank you very much, David. That's the end of the sort of questions from myself as the moderator, but there is a couple of questions, I think, on the chat. I will try and pick out those questions that are more related to the policy document rather than sort of general ones. David, seeing you're up, I think there is actually a question there for you if I read it out to you. It says, and this is from Ijai, apologies if I've mispronounced your name. Many energy projects face financial bottlenecks, especially those targeting low-income and off-grid communities. Do you think some policies accelerate unequal access and infrastructure gaps?
Okay, the second component of that question, please.
Do you think some policies accelerate unequal access and infrastructure gaps?
Wow, that's quite an interesting.
You're earning me money today.
For sure. But I think maybe it's not deliberate, even if the policies don't cover that. And that's the reason why we are saying if we shift the narrative, then it will help in thinking afresh the way we draft the policies so that they don't look as if they're excluding these population planning groups. Yeah.
No, great. Thank you very much, David. I think also, Amani, there's a question here for you from Jackson. How are you accelerating the clean energy sector and address negative health environmental impacts in Turkana County? Would focus on practical implementation, inclusion, and sustainable benefits.
Thank you, Mark. Of course, accelerating the clean energy sector involves a combination of policy, technology investment, and public awareness initiatives. And as the county government of Turkana, our focus has been more on policy development. And so far, we have managed to implement the county energy policy that was passed early this year. And part of the policy will take care on the clean cooking initiatives and the need for the community to adapt clean cooking initiatives. And of course, being a marginalized county, there is a lot of reliance by the marginalized community on charcoal. And that again, of course, result to cutting of trees, which again result to deforestation. And of course, being a county that is hosting the refugee and of course the population of the displaced community in Turkana County, it's really a challenge to us as the county government because both the displaced population and also the hosting, a higher percentage of all the two community deeply rely on the cutting on charcoal, which has resulted to massive cutting of trees in the region. And part of our policy is to inform how best we'll be able to mitigate and how best we can be able to create awareness within our communities, both the displaced and the hosting community, to adapt clean cooking initiatives and also to reduce over-reliance on charcoal, which of course has resulted to the cutting of trees. And we have also adapted technological innovation, where we have done a lot of incorporation of clean cooking agencies to come into Turkana County and also be able to supply these appliances in good number, because most of them early, like 2 years ago, when we used to create awareness within our communities on the need for them to adopt clean cooking initiative, they used to ask us where are these appliances or what are some of these clean cooking. We need them in practical. So through those practical demonstration and also the need for supply, or at then there were no clean cooking appliances that were in the market. And of course, another challenge was because of the price. Most of these are the clean cooking appliances, especially the gas cookers and everything. The price sometimes is very high, and most of our community, being vulnerable, cannot be able to avoid such appliances, and that also poses a critical challenge. But the government has also been supporting through the COSA program. They've been supporting by subsidizing some of those appliances so that they will be able to afford. And of course, most of the local population, especially the pastoralist community, most of them, of course, cannot afford such challenges. But of course, it remains again a challenge, especially on now the pastoralist community who are moving from one place to another. And another call is infrastructure development, building necessary infrastructure, especially on the off-grid. That we have managed, and that's why we have been able to support private developers like Udura, Renivia, and also the refugee-owned developers to be able to power. Because initially, due to administrative dynamics of the government, most of the refugees population did not have access to power because they were not able to meet most of the administrative requirements. And of course, the national grid could not be extended to the displaced settings. And now, due to incorporation of the private developers, we have been able to expand those grids even to accommodate the displaced population and make sure that they also have access to energy. And that has also helped us to reduce a lot of reliance on charcoal, because now, due to access to that energy, a good number of them have now moved from relying on the traditional cooking method and now using the modern clean cooking methods. And another one is on policy awareness, public awareness and education. That is a continuous process that we continue to undertake as the government, and also institutions or humanitarian organizations, especially the SNV. And GIZ also, under the Energy Solution for Displacement setting, played a critical role in creating awareness within the community on the need for them to adopt clean cooking initiatives. And the last one, I think there is need for collaboration, international collaboration, where those partners who have, of course, this is a challenge to us, and we are calling on organizations who are venturing on these clean cooking initiatives. If maybe they can create, they can support the county government and also the hosting community in creating this continuous awareness within our population, to be able for them to adapt globally accepted methods on clean cooking initiative, and also the best practices and funding for clean energy projects. So that will be able to also support us as a government, because we are hosting two big populations, which we are not able to manage. And even creating awareness, we cannot be able to cover a large scope, because being a broader county and hosting also a large number of both the refugee and the hosting community, it still poses a great challenge to us how to manage and also mitigate. Thank you.
Amoni, thank you very much for such a comprehensive response. Really appreciate it. And colleagues, if you look in the chat, Amoni has actually posed some very interesting questions, I think, for all of us to take home and go away. Unfortunately, we are at time with regards to the Q&A panelists. But colleagues, I would really like to thank Ayu, Ben, Amoni, Dorwit and David for your time, not only to attend today, but also prepare. You've been fantastic with your sort of experience and knowledge on this topic to provide some additional context to the report, which will follow. So thank you very much. I would now like to hand over to Joelle with some sort of closing remarks, and she will close up today's webinar. So over to you, Joelle, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. And of course, thank you, everyone, for joining the call, and also especially the panelists for expanding on the point that we truly kind of emphasize in the report. And this is something that I'll say, please go and read the report to find more details. But I'll just like to say that today's conversation is clear, and it's truly emphasizing on energy access for displaced population. It's not just about funding or technical problem alone. It starts with primarily with governance and also consideration of the displaced population. I think it was clear to all of us coming from our panelists that we need to shift the perspective and how we are considering displaced population to truly change the narrative and start where we need to start from. So including refugees, because that's when we can start thinking of sustainability and also success of the policies that we are putting in place. So the lesson is clear. Lasting change requires to move from short-term humanitarian project to long-term national inclusion. And with that, I'd definitely like to say thank you and also encourage you to read the reports. And if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to the GPA. We'll be able to reconnect and continue this conversation. And I hope it's not just a conversation, it's a beginning of what we are going to do in our respective work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Really appreciate it. Joelle, thank you. Very much a strong call to action. It's not just a report. This is supposed to inspire and result on some real impact on the ground. So thank you, everyone that's joined today. And as Joelle said, please reach out if you've got any suggestions, any recommendations, or you need support on this topic. It really is. We're here to help. So thank you, everyone. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.